We are going to take a moment and we're all going to say, oh, nature is pretty. Okay. Nature is pretty. Now, we're going to talk about it. I was joking on Facebook that we should have some kind of raffle here of who guesses how many of these jars I own. The problem is I don't know how many I own. I'd have to go down to my root cellar and count, which I didn't bother to do. So, no raffle. So, fermented food, that is a scary word, right? Don't tell people your food's fermented. They will freak out because we equate fermented with rotten. Here's the difference between fermented food and rotten food. Fermented food has been broken down by beneficial bacteria. Rotten food has been broken down by problematic bacteria. That's the difference. You don't want to eat something that's rotten because the bacteria that's growing in there is going to impair your health. Fermented food is broken down by bacteria that are going to build your health. But they're both breaking down. Nature is filled with things that break things down because that's part of the cycle, right? In a forest, all that stuff's got to be broken down so that new stuff can grow. In your garden, all the old stuff's broken down and incorporated into your soil so new stuff can grow. This process of breaking things down to bring more life is part of how nature works, and that's what fermented food is. This has been broken down by bacteria that are beneficial to you. It makes it easier to digest, and it invites those bacteria into your body where you need them to live and thrive and grow to do all sorts of things. And we're not going to get into that today. That's all in the gut class. You guys have got all the incredible things those bacteria do for your digestion, your immune system. All of those things are amazing. But the basic summation is, if you are not getting these bacteria into your body on a daily basis, your body cannot work correctly. Nature meant this to be a constant in our life. That's why it does it with food automatically. It just happens because it's that important to our health. So if you're talking to people, call it probiotic food. Same thing, but people have a different mental connotation of probiotic versus fermented, okay? And they're both true. This is all fermented food. This is all probiotic food, but sometimes we've got a little bit of a brain switch there that we might as well use to our advantage. How many of you have fermented anything before? Okay, so some of you have got an appreciation for what's sitting up here, right? On purpose. The black stuff in the back of the refrigerator does not count. So, yeah, we're talking on purpose. I'm trying to think the best order to do this in. So the main objective when you are fermenting your probiotic food is you want to do it in a way that encourages the growth of good bacteria and discourages the growth of bad bacteria. Right? Because they're all symbiotic, they're all around us all the time. And just like in our bodies, we want to eat in a way that promotes the growth of good bacteria and inhibits the growth of bad bacteria. And unfortunately, the standard American diet does the reverse. It inhibits the growth of good bacteria in our digestive tract, and it promotes the growth of bad bacteria. And this is one of your great tools in starting to switch that in your body. Starting to switch things so that you're promoting the growth of good bacteria in your digestive tract. And those, we talk in the gut class about it being an army, right? And one of them's got to be in control. And whichever one you feed will be in control. If you eat processed food and sugar, which army are you feeding? The bad bacteria, and they will run your health. When you start taking out the processed food and the sugar and putting in the probiotic food, it switches. You're feeding your good army. And they take over, and they will control the bad army for you. You don't have to worry about that. As long as you feed the good guys, they will control the bad guys for you. And that's why this is so profound for health. Now there's a couple, let's talk about kind of some of the different ways we have up here of fermenting. This is yogurt made from raw milk. This is kefir, and I'm just going to apologize right now. I call it kefir. Whether it's supposed to be kefir or kefir, it doesn't matter. I call it kefir, and that's just what I'm going to do. So this is raw milk kefir, and they're on opposite ends for no good reason. But what's the difference between yogurt and kefir? Does anybody know? Okay. Yogurt is made with a starter culture of a few strains of bacteria. There's a couple you have to have. Acidophilus is the main one that everybody knows about, and that's why when you have an antibiotic, your doctor says, go home and eat yogurt, because he knows bacteria are supposed to be good, and it's the only source he knows, and you get 1 or 2 bacteria. Okay, this isn't going to save your health. Your body needs over 200 strains of bacteria living in your digestive tract. You got to have a little more variety to get the rest of the stuff in that your body needs. Okay, kefir. Over here, let's show you what a kefir grain looks like. This is not made with a starter culture, not a powder. It's not like you can take a scoop of kefir from a previous thing and start a new one like you can with yogurt. Kefir is made with something called kefir grains. Okay, and this is, I don't know why that's stringy. I've got too many of them in here all together. But it's really funny. Okay, go away. Okay, this is kefir grains. They look almost like cauliflower. They're squishy. Okay. And this is what is known as a SCOBY, symbiotic colony of beneficial bacteria and yeast. Okay. So this is literally a colony of yeast and bacteria that have made their own little home, and they're just growing and multiplying. So the more I feed this, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until I have one and I can share it with you because I now have more than I need. Okay? It will just grow gradually and gradually as they multiply. And this is what makes kefir. So let's pretend for a second that this is just plain milk. Here's how I make kefir. Ready? This is really technical, so I want you to watch closely. Open, drop, close. Done. So one thing I want you to know is this is easier than this. And you get way more bacteria and stuff in this than you get here. In kefir, you're going to get over 50 different strains of bacteria, and it has yeast. Yogurt has no yeast. Now, most of us are scared of yeast because we've heard of candida and all of these things that are growing in our body. But there's just like bacteria, there's beneficial yeast that control the bad yeast. And when you use kefir, you're filling your body with those beneficial yeasts that will control the bad yeast. So these are good yeasts. So this is full of over 50 strains of bacteria and I don't even know how many strains of beneficial yeast. So that's the difference. This has a couple strains of bacteria, 0 yeast. The kefir has a whole bunch of strains of bacteria and beneficial yeast. And it's easier because to do this, you've got the instructions. There's so many ways you can do this. For these bacteria to multiply and turn this into yogurt, you need a starter culture and you need warmth. So you have to have a way of keeping this between 95 and 110 degrees the entire time those bacteria are growing. So I have a big dehydrator, one of the square dehydrator. I have a Sedona, which is like an Excalibur, big dehydrator. And so for me, it's easy. I put in my starter culture. I stick this entire jar in my dehydrator. I close the door. I set it at 110 degrees for 24 hours, and I walk away. But if you don't have a big dehydrator, Melanie's done a blog post for us on the way she does by doing this in a cooler with hot water. If you have a yogurt machine that maintains the temperature, that's another option. But this has got to be maintained at a very precise temperature for it to work. This does not. Room temperature is all you need. So I put my grains in my milk, whatever milk you want. It does have to be dairy milk for these because they feed on lactose. So you can't throw this in almond milk and get kefir. But you put this in any kind of goat, dairy, whatever you want, and they will just start eating your milk. I do mine in my goat, yeah. So they just start eating your milk. Now, if these feed on lactose, what's another advantage of this? Yes, it'll eat your lactose. So we as adults don't process lactose the way children do. And so lactose intolerance becomes an issue for a lot of people. It's just our lactose enzymes decrease with age. And so if you've got lactose issues, this will fix that as well. It's also going to pre-digest all your proteins. And then the biggest thing of all, of course, is that as those bacteria multiply, they go into the milk. So when it's done, and depending on the warmth, you're looking at 24 to 36 hours. Mine in the winter takes 36 hours. In the summer, it takes 24, just because of kind of the temperature. And these are alive. They change with the seasons. They'll have times of the year they grow prolifically, and they'll have times of the year they don't. They're alive. But 24 to 36 hours, and it's just until it thickens. So the way I tell whether mine's done, I don't know if we'll be able to do this in this jar, but I just tip it. Do you see how it comes away in a solid mass? You see that? Then I know it's done. If it's a slosh, if it's just totally sloshing around as a liquid, I know it's not done. But when I do this and then I get that thing at the bottom where the whole thing pulls away in a mass, I know we're done. If you over kefir it, if you leave it in longer, it'll start to separate into curds and whey. So if it starts separating on you, that's all it means. It just got overdone, unless you like that. If you want to be able to make kefir cheese, then you just take that and put it through cheesecloth, strain the whey out, and you have a cream cheese substitute. Or you can make dips out of it or all sorts of yummy things. Okay?
So you said leave it longer to make it into the curds?
If you want it. If you want to get to that curds and whey point, just leave it longer than 24 to 36 hours. It'll keep digesting it to a further point where it's going to start to separate. Another thing that'll happen is these are going to grow and multiply. So eventually you're going to have more grains than your milk needs, and then it will overprocess too fast and it'll start to separate. I had that happen to me where it had been perfect for forever and then all my kefir was separating. What is this? I had too many grains for the amount of milk that I had. And so it was processing too fast. And so I just needed to divide and take out some grains. You need approximately 1 tablespoon of grains per quart of milk. Okay, you don't need a lot. This is a 3-quart container. So for this, I would need about 3 tablespoons of grains. At our house, we do smoothies every day, or you eat it like yogurt. You just put it in a bowl. So the difference is because of those yeasts, this is going to have a yeasty taste to it. And that's where some people struggle. They taste it, and it's not as mild as yogurt because it has not just bacteria in it, it's got yeast. And it's one of those things your taste buds adjust to. So if you taste it the first time and you're like, that's yeasty, I'm not sure I love that, for a little while, add more fruit to it. And then you can, do you know what I mean? And your taste buds will acclimate, and you'll get used to that taste over time. Yeah, I'll put a little. So, we talked about the disadvantages of fruit in a smoothie. This is a place where I think the pros outweigh the cons. So for me to get this, so my son was dairy-free his whole life. We knew at 2 weeks that kid did not do dairy, and he's been dairy-free his whole life. And that's why we got the goats. And anyway, but he's never had dairy. He doesn't like it. If you try to get him to drink milk, he doesn't like it because he's never had it. And so I had this beautiful goat milk kefir now, and he's like, no thank you. And I made him smoothies, and we didn't get anywhere. And what I found is a banana is magic. A banana is enough to overpower the yeast flavor so that he could not taste that. And so for a while, I always put a banana in his smoothie, and now I don't have to anymore. He's gotten used to it, and he now, that's my oldest, Jordan, that was here last night, he now will not go to bed without his kefir smoothie. I would do, it's good. Do it anytime you can. But first thing in the morning or last thing before bed are great because then they're getting right into your digestive, your stomach's not backed up with other stuff, and it's going to get right in there and be able to do its magic.
Is this the container that you always put your kefir
Yes, and we'll talk about containers here in a minute and why I use this one.
Is there a particular dose per day that you aim for?
When you start fermented foods, you're going to want to start slow. Because when you start to put these in, they're going to start killing stuff in your gut, killing bad stuff in your gut. And if you do that too fast, you can create a healing crisis. I mean, it's not going to hurt you, but you may not feel good, as your body starts to detox. So, I would start with 1/4 of a cup, see how you do. I can do any amount, and I'm good. But, but I remember the first time 15 years ago when I learned all this gut stuff and I started getting lots of probiotics into my system, I pretty much had the flu for a week. That's how much stuff I killed. I was down on the couch, flu, couldn't move, hurt everywhere. And it was just all the stuff dying that needed to die in me. So if you've got a real overgrowth of a lot of junk in there, this stuff may make you sick at first, but it's good. Just hang on there, get through it. It's killing the bad stuff that you want to die. If it happens intensely, you won't feel good. But it's all okay. It's all good in the long run. So that's milk, kefir, and yogurt. Then there is water kefir. And that is this one. Now, this one is ready to go to step 2, so we're going to do that together so that you can see how this works. Now, these have grains in them also, but they look completely different. Well, I didn't name them. I don't know why they call them grains, because been calling it a colony, I guess. So can you see this? I'm trying to. Okay. So these are clear. They're squishy too, but they're little clear blobs of a colony of beneficial yeast and bacteria. I don't know who thousands of years ago figured this out. I don't know. But they've been being shared and grown for a long time. So this is what a water kefir grain looks like. The difference is it's food. A milk kefir grain eats lactose. These eat sugar. So they need a sugar source. So you can put these in coconut water. Coconut water's got a ton of sugar. If you're pregnant, that's an awesome option because the coconut water is going to give you all those minerals and electrolytes that your body needs because you're increasing your blood volume, you're filling all that water. So coconut water is a great option for that. You can put them in fruit juice and they'll eat the sugar in the fruit juice. You can put just regular sugar. Now, you guys know how I think, so when I started this, I'm like, I don't want to eat sugar, I'm putting them in honey. Okay, can you guess what the downside of putting these in honey is? Raw honey is antibacterial. So for a while, it's wonderful, and I loved the taste of it, and it was great, but my grains got weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker because I was putting a lovely antibacterial substance in with my bacteria. So it does not work long term. If you want to do honey, that's fine, but you're going to have to kind of keep starting over with your grains because they're going to have a hard time.
Does putting them in regular refined sugar solve the problem that refined sugar gives?
Yes, it's going to eat it. So my compromise now is I use just organic sugar. So I just get the organic sugar at Costco, and that's what I throw in because they're going to eat it. I'm not going to eat it.
But you could use fruit juice?
They're not as happy in the first stage with fruit juice. I'll show you how you add fruit juice at the second stage is usually what I do. They want, okay, so why is refined sugar bad in our gut? It goes in and it's so bioavailable to the bad bacteria, this refined extracted sugar, that they just gobble it up and they multiply. But here we can use that to our advantage. Same here. This is a very easy source of food, so it works really well.
So if you drink that, will it eat the sugar in you?
No, because you're not going to eat the grains. You're just going to drink the fluid that they've processed for you. You can eat the grains. If people get too many, some people just eat them, or they feed them to their chickens, or they do all sorts of things because they're probiotics. But in general, you're using your grains to make more, and you're drinking the byproduct. So this has been in here for a couple of days. Okay, so it had this. You put 1/4 cup of sugar per quart of water in to keep your grains happy, to give them enough to eat. And then you leave it for a couple days, 2 to 3 days. You want to get to the point that this doesn't taste sweet anymore, because that tells you that the grains have done their job and they've eaten the sugar. When you get to the point that it's not sweet anymore, we need to strain. So we're going to just strain. So this is finished. It's been in here for 2 to 3 days.
The first stage.
First stage, 2 to 3 days.
They call sparkling water.
Yep, I'll show you how that works. And I think I'm going to overflow. I did that a little too enthusiastically, maybe. Okay, so we'll finish straining our grains here in a minute so you can see. So when I get to this point, then this is where I love, love, love my leftover Classico jars, because these lids are going to work. I did it. I got it off. Okay. So we're just going to pour this in our jars, and we're going to do a second ferment. And this is where you can get the bubbly soda to create a soda pop substitute that's probiotic. So this will fill 3 jars, because that was a 3-quart container. And I just like the 3-quart amount. You don't have to do it in that amount. When you start, you can just do a quart at a time. For me, I like doing the 3 quarts at a time, so that's just what I do. But you can do it in any amount.
How often do you go through your batch?
What?
How often do you go through your batch? Like
We can drink enough of it to just keep doing it every 2 to 3 days, usually.
You like the water versus the yogurt, the milk Kefir batch?
I like them both. They're just totally different. They're just totally different. So can you guys see? So there's all my grains.
So do the grains get bigger?
Yes. They'll get bigger. They'll divide. So then I've taken out the liquid where they've eaten the sugar, right? So then the next step is just that they go back in here. And no, I don't usually wash the jar. They go back in there with, and you know what, I'm not actually going to do it because this is not purified water. I'll do it when I get home. But these go back in here. The sugar goes in here, and I fill it up with water, stir to dissolve, close, and that's it. It goes back on the counter for 2 to 3 days. So let's talk about how you can add flavors, things that you need to add. Now, at home, I have reverse osmosis water in my kitchen. And the downside of reverse osmosis water is it takes all your minerals out. Okay, so you have to have a source of minerals. And Kefir grains need minerals to be happy. So when you put your purified water in here, to keep these growing and happy, you need a source of minerals. So you have a couple choices. You can just put a well-washed egg shell in, and they will eat it. They will just, over time, they will eat it and extract all the minerals out of the eggshells. This is another one. This is something I just have at home, so I use. This is a trace mineral complex. So you know the Utah Real Salt? Same source. They've just extracted the multi-minerals from the salt, but it's in a liquid form. And I just take and put a squirt of this in when I do my stuff. And then they've got the minerals that they need.
Does raw water have enough minerals?
I would think so. I would think so. So if they start to struggle, if they're not happy, if they're not multiplying, if it's not turning into kefir, if they're not eating the sugar, if you can tell it's not processing, then you might want to look at maybe they need more minerals than you're giving them. But that's all they need: sugar, water, and a source of minerals, and sitting on your counter. So here's another one of those things. Fermenting feels overwhelming because I have a lot of children to feed now. I have to feed my actual children, and I have to feed all my stuff. And, you've got your sourdough starch that needs to be fed, and you've got your kefir grains that need to be changed out, and you've got this that needs to be changed out, and it can start to feel a little overwhelming. And you don't need to do all of them. You guys decide what you want to do and where you want to start and what you want to experiment with. But once you get the knack of it, it's not hard. I can take literally 10 minutes right before I go to bed. I change the grains, my milk grains, to a new bottle, put the old bottle in the fridge. If it's been 2 to 3 days, this one I don't do every day. If it's been 2 to 3 days, shuffle it out, put the old one in the fridge, put the new sugar in, it's 10 minutes. So there again, it's something that feels big and overwhelming, but nature's doing 99.9% of the work for you. You are just setting it on the counter. The only thing you have to do is just make sure it's fed. And so it may feel a little big at first, but just trust that once you get in the rhythm of this, and it's just 10 minutes you invest once a day or every other day, it's not that hard. It's not that big a deal, right? Andrea went home from the retreat last time, and I was at your house a couple weeks later, and she pulled the soda pop out of her fridge and said, "Look," So it really is not hard.
Question: where do you get the grains?
Okay, so you get the grains from someone who has grains. So if you've got a friend, if you've got a neighbor, people post on the Facebook group all the time. I live here. Is there anyone in the group around me that's got extra grains to share? Often you can even just search the classifieds and just search for water kefir, and people are selling them. Usually when people sell their grains, it's usually $10 to get enough to get started, and then you never have to buy them again. It's a one-time investment. Culturesforhealth.com also has all the options that you would want. Those will just come dehydrated, and it'll take you a couple batches to get them happy and going again, but it totally works. Now let's talk about this second ferment for a second. Yeah. Okay, so this is our stuff that has now, the sugar's gone pretty much, right? It's been eaten by our grains, and you could drink this just as it is. It's probiotic, it's wonderful, but it's boring. Do you want to taste some?
Is it really sour?
You guys can taste it. I'll leave it here because I brought stuff in every stage for you guys to taste. So you can taste this. It's just boring. It's just bland. So this is where you get to make things interesting, and you can do anything you want. So here are my two favorites that are finished, and I've brought a whole bunch so you guys can taste this as part of our fermented lunch today. Now, do you see my lids? Okay, when I pop this is going to be carbonated. Because what you do is in your second ferment, you're going to give it a very slight supply of new sugar. So we're talking a teaspoon of honey, 1/4 cup of fruit juice, just a little bit of a new source of sugar, and then you're going to seal it with an airtight lid. So you have two options. You can do something like this with one of these lids that will be airtight, or you can buy these fun jars. Now this is a place where high quality glass is really important. These can rupture. They can explode. So don't go buy something at the dollar store. Don't go buy something at the DI for brewing your kefir. You need something that's going to hold up under pressure. I bought a case of these on Amazon. My kids think this is a lot more fun to drink than they think this is. The advantage of this jar is I love to put whole lemon slices in mine. Can't do that in here. So when I'm doing, putting whole lemon slices and stuff, I love these jars. When I'm just adding a little bit of fruit juice for my kids, these jars are great because they think they're so fun.
What kind of jar is that? Yeah.
This is a beer brewing jar.
What about
These are the jars that I buy my spaghetti sauce in at Costco, and I've just washed it out. I'm using the jar and the lid again for my kefir. Oh, the great big jars? Okay, let's talk about the great big jars. I was going to wait a second, but give me just a second and we'll get to these great big jars. So you get to add anything you want here for flavoring. So my two favorite is this one has 1/4 cup of pomegranate juice in it. And it looks pretty. My kids think it looks interesting, right? And it tastes yummy. You could put 1/4 cup of grape juice. Now what's going to happen to your fructose? It's going to get eaten. Most of it's going to get eaten.
So in this case, does it matter if you do like put make your own juice through a juicer, or if you just?
For something like this, you're going to want something that doesn't have any fiber left in it. Okay. So if you were doing your own juicer, you'd want to multi-filter it, so you're not getting the grainy stuff in your stuff. No, I do sometimes. I do put just organic juice, not concentrate, just juice in here. This is my other favorite, and this is like a ginger ale. It's got just sliced ginger and some sliced lemons and a teaspoon or two of honey. And that's my favorite. My kids don't think it's great, but I love it. And there again, you're getting the ginger, which is a digestive soothing and helps with your digestive, and the lemon, which is a cleanser for your liver and your digestive system. And so that's my favorite. I do the lemon ginger.
Can you put how many slices of ginger in here?
Depends on how much ginger flavor you want.
Oh, yeah.
If you want a little bit, put a little bit.
The raw ginger?
Yeah, I just take...
That's
I brought some. Yeah. So I don't even fully peel it. I'll just take a thing of ginger, slice off, any of the rough skin, and I just slice it and throw it in. So it needs if you want the carbonation, it has to have a little bit of a sugar source because it has to have something new to eat, and then the carbon dioxide is the byproduct of the kefir grains doing their thing. So they've got to have something to eat to put off that carbon dioxide that's going to give you the bubbly. If you don't want it bubbly, just don't put an airtight lid on it, and it won't be bubbly. So it depends on if you like that or not. I leave this out at room temperature for 24 hours, and then I move it to the fridge. It slows it down quite a bit. If it's not super bubbly at 24 hours, it'll still get a little more bubbly in the fridge. But I only leave this out because this is where you leave it a long time, you can cross the alcohol line.
Do you have a time frame on that?
You let me know.
So we could sell it, right?
Okay, now let's talk about alcohol for a second because that's a reason a lot of people are nervous about water kefir. Is they've heard that it's got alcohol in it and they're trying to avoid alcohol or they're worried about their kids or whatever. Melanie did some really extensive research on this for us years and years ago when we were all looking at this for the first time. And there are people who have done literally alcohol meter testing of this. And when you do a 2 to 3 day ferment at the beginning and this a 24-hour to 40-hour, you're less alcohol than a ripe banana. You have to remember alcohol is a normal part of the food system. You never are avoiding alcohol 100%. It doesn't exist. Alcohol is a normal part of fruit. It's a normal part of the food system. We don't want to cross that line where we're getting strong drinks, right? We're getting things with a high percentage of alcohol. But just so you know, we did look at that carefully when we were deciding whether to do this or not. Was that an issue? And unless you put a lot of fruit and leave it on the counter a long time, you're going to be fine. That is a consideration. There's some considerations with carbonation and stomach acid. There's some with bone. So if you feel that's one where I don't know that I've got all the data to really give you a scientific evaluation for that. I would trust your body. It's a novel concept, huh? If you drink it carbonated and it's not what's right for your body's going to be kind of like, If you drink it and your body goes, more, drink it, trust your body. But you do not need the carbonation to get all the probiotic benefits. The carbonation is just fun. It is not necessary. So you can drink it at this stage and have tons of probiotics. You can do a second flavored ferment and just not put an airtight lid on it and have all the probiotics. You do not need the carbonation to get the benefit.
Is this what you guys use to make the energy drink?
Yes. So Melanie's blog post about her energy drink was just taking this after its second ferment, putting the chia seed in, because that after the second ferment, and that was her energy drink. So if you haven't read that blog, that's a blog post. That's a good one to go read. And that's what this was.
Does lid, you know how they have the pop-up seal thing? Does it actually seal and not?
Does it seal itself again? No, I haven't had it sealed, but there's a lot of pressure in there, so they can be a little tricky to open. Milk kefir, I personally wouldn't bother buying.
Really?
Now,
Because it's destroyed?
a lot of it, it can't do what you can do at home and still be able to sell it. It's got to be able to sit on a shelf for 4 weeks, and be shipped and be, they've got to do things. And most of them have a ton of sugar added because people are used to sugared yogurt and they want it to taste like that. So I did in earlier stages of my journey, I did buy milk kefir, but with what I know now, I wouldn't bother.
And the water kefir?
I've never seen it sold. Has anyone seen it sold?
Are you thinking kombucha?
Kombucha is different, and we'll deal with kombucha at the advanced retreat. Sylvia Harbour will be coming back, and she'll do kombucha for us in the fall because that's a much more complicated issue on multiple fronts. So we'll deal with that one in the fall. But this can get you started. Okay, let's talk about these jars. Okay, when you ferment vegetables, let's move on to vegetables here. Or fruits. We've got fruits and vegetables up here. And they're so pretty and they're so fun. When you ferment vegetables, the ingredient that you are using to control that we want to suppress the bad bacteria and we want to promote the good bacteria is salt. Because salt is a bacterial suppressant. And so this is chemistry. You've got to get your salt content high enough to suppress the bad bacteria so it doesn't rot, but you've got to keep the salt low enough that you don't shut down your good bacteria. So the magic ingredient when you get to all of these is salt. Now, many of you have probably heard of fermenting this stuff with whey, right? That is natural traditions, nourishing traditions. There we go. Nourishing traditions thing, where they have promoted ferment everything with whey. If you get into fermenting purists, they will tell you no. That is a popular concept, but that's where it's come from. It's come from nourishing traditions. That has not come from more of the traditional fermenting background. And the reason is that the bacteria that grow in milk, right, that are in your whey, are not what grow on vegetables. They're two different animals. They're two different colonies. They're not the same thing. And so when you try to ferment your vegetables with whey, you're crossing lines that aren't natural. You're not promoting the natural process. Now you're introducing kind of a foreign thing and trying to get it to grow in an environment that was not its original intention. And it's not that it's harmful. It's not going to do anything bad, but it's not the ideal. So, when we ferment vegetables, we've got to have enough salt to keep that bacterial balance in check. Bad bacteria down, good bacteria up. And then we have to keep out mold. And that is where the jar comes into play. And you guys have probably seen there are many, many fermenting jar options. And the goal is keep out the mold. That is the goal. Are you guys familiar with aerobic and anaerobic from a biology perspective? Okay, anaerobic means without oxygen. Aerobic means with oxygen. There are some bacteria that grow with oxygen, and there are some that are anaerobic bacteria, and they grow without oxygen. In fermenting vegetables, we are trying to promote anaerobic bacteria, bacteria that grow in the absence of oxygen. If your vegetables have a source of oxygen, you don't get the right bacterial development. And so you've got to have a way to keep out the oxygen and to keep out the mold. So this is called a Fido jar, F-I-D-O. And as you can tell, I've tried a million jars, and this is my favorite. Okay? The other options are canning jar. I mean, some people just use canning jars, and I have never made that work without having to fight mold. I did that a couple times. I'm like, no, this doesn't work. I hate fighting the mold. Then there's the little water seal things that stick up. You guys have seen those? And people make, you can buy Fido jars with the little water vacuum seal from pickleIt.com. And they said, and I've done that. I have some pickleIt jars, and it's this exact same Fido jar. It just has a hole with a seal in the top, and then it has this plastic part that sticks out, and you fill it with water. And what that does is when you ferment, this stuff is going to produce gases that have to get out, but you don't want air to get in. And so the challenge is, how do you let air out without letting air in? And so people invented these little things that you put on the top of your jar. I should have brought one, sorry. But that way, air that's coming out bubbles out through the water, but the water keeps any new air from getting in.
They were sauerkraut then.
Yeah, it totally works, but it's not my favorite. And I'll tell you why. There's nothing wrong with it. It will work just fine. I'm always trying to find the best. Not good, I want the best. And so there's these that have these little things. So that's your other option. But these I love. And the reason is, have you ever tried to put the others in your fridge? With the thing on the top? It's kind of a pain. They're awkward. They're awkward to store. If you put them in your root cellar and that thing gets knocked off, you're going to lose your ferment. And so I find that little thing sticking on the top an added expense and awkward. It's perfectly functional. If you have them, they will work just fine. But I find them awkward and an expense you don't need. Fido jars are magic because they've got this rubber gasket. And so this is an airtight rubber gasket, but it will let air out. So as these start to bubble, I tell you to, when you do your ferments, put them for the first couple days on a cookie sheet. That's one of my big hints that's in your instructions. Take these jars when you fill them and put them on a rimmed cookie sheet. Because during the first couple days, this is going to get really active. And you're actually going to have air and water, very likely, that are going to bubble out. And if you're on a rimmed cookie sheet, you don't make a mess.
I didn't do that the first time, and I had a mess.
Yeah, I've had my whole counters covered in liquid before. So it's a great hint. Put your ferments, it's only the first couple days that they do that, and then they settle down and you can move them to wherever you want. But in those first couple days, put them on a rimmed cookie sheet. So this gasket will allow that. It's going to bubble out, the air is going to come out, the liquid that needs to come out will come out, but they won't let air in. So this, and I have, my rate of having mold in a Fido jar is 0.
Wow, that's
And I don't use a weight. In most fermenting systems, you've got to put a weight up here to keep everything perfectly submerged, because if anything pops above the water, it'll mold. And I've done my pickles in just regular canning jars, and I've put weights on them, and then some of the spices pop above your water line, and you get mold, and you lose everything. My rate with Fido jars for mold is 0. Never have I gotten mold. It does not mold. This carrot could pop up. Be careful not to stick your fingers in your jars because you don't want to introduce a different bacteria that takes over. But you know, that carrot could pop up above the water line. I've had times where I've put them like in my root cellar or something, and I've lost a little bit of water, and there's actually been a layer of stuff exposed in there, but never molded. So these are my favorite. Let's kind of go through these one at a time and how this process works and show you how to do it. Now, everyone wants to know where to buy Fido jars. And at the last retreat, I could tell you the absolute cheapest place to buy Fido jars, and last month they quit carrying them. So we are on the search for a new source. Watch the Facebook page. We'll find you a new source. These are my 2 favorite sizes. This is a 1.5 liter. The reason the 1.5 liter is my favorite is it's a perfect size for the fridge. It's narrow, you know, it doesn't take up a lot of space in your fridge, but it's tall. All the other sizes are same width but short, and so it's not very efficient use of your fridge space. This one is tall and narrow, and it works great for, you can see, just about everything. This is the 3 liter size, and it's my next favorite. And it's great for places where you need more width. So you see, it's perfect for a pickle spear, to be able to line them up straight across. There is a 5 liter, and I did sauerkraut in a 5 liter once. It's so heavy, I dropped it and lost everything. So 5 liter is too big. Stick with 3.
And this is the same exact jar that you have all of your,
Yes, this is a 3 liter. So I do my yogurt in a 3 liter, I do my kefir in a 3 liter, I do my bigger ferments in a 3 liter, and I do everything else in 1.5. You can buy cheap versions of these at IKEA, but when you get to fermenting, but they're made in China, and when you get to fermenting, I wouldn't go there. You need pure, good, strong stuff for fermenting. Probably. But yeah, I wouldn't want my ferments pulling lead out of the glass or whatever the case would be. All right, so let's talk about these different ferments, how you do them, and then we're going to have lunch, and you guys are going to be able to taste all of this stuff. Because when you start fermenting, you don't know what you like, and you don't know what you don't like. And so the amazing thing is I did all the work for you, and you get to find out what you like and what you don't, how you might want to adapt things and do them differently for your family. Let's talk about taste for just 1 second before we go into the details. Everything that is fermented is going to be slightly sour. That's just the way it works. It's sour. Now, you have all these different taste buds in your mouth, right? You've got sweet, you've got salty, you've got sour. And one thing that they have found culturally is because we took out fermented foods in the last 100 years, our sour taste buds have atrophied. We are not used to eating sour fermented food, whereas we have a taste bud that likes this, that craves this. But in most of us, it's just kind of died because we don't eat this stuff anymore. So when you first have it, if you don't like it, don't give up. You have a dead taste bud that you can revive. And as you start to eat this, it doesn't mean you have to eat tons, but just because 1 spoonful of sauerkraut has a trillion count of probiotics. A trillion. 1 tablespoon. A trillion bacteria. You find me any probiotic pill on the market that can come even close to that. So you don't have to eat huge quantities of this stuff to get benefit. Can you see why you need to start slow? If your body's not used to bacteria and you start throwing in 5 trillion bacteria, your system's going to go, whoa! But you don't have to eat a lot. So if you don't love this stuff at first, I hope you find at least one of these that appeals to you more and you can say, oh, I can start there. But if you don't love it, just keep giving your body and something happens. It does not take your body very long before your brain forms the association between I eat that taste, my body gets what it needs. It doesn't take that long, and you crave it. So just be a little bit patient with your body. This is not one of those things of, oh, I just don't like green beans, or whatever the case may be. This isn't one of those personal taste things. This is just letting your mouth develop back to where it should be. And, if you go to Asian cultures, this taste is a major component of all of their recipes because they grow up eating all of this fermented food, and they would never make a meal without it because it's as important as salty and sweet and whatever in their flavor profile in everything that they cook. We've just lost it, but it comes back. Okay, so we want you to taste them all for lunch, but if you're a little put off, it doesn't mean you'll be put off forever. It just means you need a little bit of time. Okay, let's start with pickles. Pickles are the most common fermented food in all of history. Why? Why else? Okay, there's 2 vegetables that naturally have a huge quantity of beneficial bacteria that are pro-fermentation on them, and they are cucumbers and cabbage. So you want to get your cucumbers and your cabbage from a good source. Find, if you don't grow them in your own garden, go to a farmer's market. On KSL, people post this stuff, farmers that grow this locally. I've bought pickling cucumbers from a farmer I found on KSL classifieds before. Just find a good local source, okay? They naturally have bacteria on their skin just growing out in nature that is the bacteria that you want to grow when you ferment. So you don't need a culture. It's all already on the food.
So if you grow it in your garden, you chop it off, wash the dirt off, and then use that.
You wash them very gently. Okay, you don't want dirt clods in your ferment. But if you get some dirt, it's not all bad. Have you guys ever heard of soil-based? Okay, that's a dumb question. Who's listened to my class? You guys know what soil-based probiotics are, right? It's in the class. There's stuff in the dirt we need. So you're going to wash this stuff really gently. Okay? So, yeah, anything you're going to ferment, wash it gently. You want as much of that beneficial bacteria that exists in nature to stay on the food as you can. You just don't want to be eating rocks and dirt clods. But wash them gently. And then they will have everything that they need. The only thing you've got to add is water, salt, and seasonings. And that's it. All the bacteria are there. I did a whole bunch of pickles last fall. So these pickles that are here, I did not make for the retreat. They're from last fall. And I put them down in my root cellar. Same thing. I have a cold storage room with a dirt floor. Okay, so that's where they went. Ideal temperature for long-term storage of fermented foods is around 50 degrees. That's ideal. So a fridge is a little too cold, and your house is a little too warm. Now that does not have to be exact. Remember, these are living organisms, and they can adapt and whatever. But you want to you want to get colder than room temperature, but warmer than fridge temperature is your ideal. So if you've got a cold spot in your basement, perfect. You know, you just want to get that temperature down a little bit. So these have been just sitting in my root cellar where it's just a little bit colder than my house, and they sat all winter. So, you know, pickles were never a canned food until this century. They've always been fermented. Why do pregnant women crave pickles? There's no time in your life you need fermented food more than when you're pregnant. We don't have time to go into why, but it's in the classes. Okay, it's in the online classes. It's critical to your baby's immune system. Okay, sauerkraut is the other most common fermented food of all of history. Why? Because the cabbage also have the beneficial bacteria automatically on them. All you have to add is water and salt and any seasonings that you want, and that's it. Nature's giving you everything that you need. So, I mean, do you guys find it amazing how people figured this out? Like millennia ago, before there were microscopes, before they knew what a bacteria was, they had figured this out, and they knew which vegetables worked, and they knew how to do it. I find that remarkable. You know, we're now having to use science to go backwards and recreate something that people have known forever, and we just threw it away because we thought it didn't matter, and we wanted convenience instead, and it's really sad. But people knew this stuff before there was any science to back it up. And the other thing I want you to remember is a lot of people get scared with ferments, and they're like, if I do it wrong, I'm going to poison my family. Someone's going to die, I just know it, and Child Protective Services is going to come and take away my kids because I fermented food. It's not like that, because people have done this forever, and we're going to do this with a scale and measuring cups. They didn't have that, and it was still fine. You know, this is a natural process. It's not that easy to mess up. Okay, you're going to be okay. If you see black mold growing on your ferment, don't eat it. But in general, you know, this isn't that hard. It's not that easy to do it wrong. If you don't get it exactly right, it's going to be okay. You're not going to poison your family. It's going to be fine, especially in these phyto jars that take so much of that risk out because they control that anaerobic environment for you, and so it's really safe. So pickles, you've got 2 pickle recipes in your book, and I am going to tell you an adaptation to make. In the dill pickle recipe that's got the coriander, It's got coriander in it, right? Scratch out the coriander. Okay, I discovered something. So when I canned all these pickles last year, I did all these variations. Is the label still on here? See? This one has yes, turmeric and celery, no coriander, no fennel. And I did every variation, and I wanted to taste them all and see what I liked, you know. So every bottle was just a little bit different. Coriander makes them much more sour. Much more sour. So if you know, I would not do coriander again. So
What about the fennel?
the fennel is just whether you like fennel flavor or not. That's just a personal taste. But there was something about the coriander that made it much more vinegary. It gave it a much stronger, and I even brought my son out before I came up to the retreat. I got all my bottles out. I'm like, taste this, taste this, taste, and he agreed with me. This one was his favorite because it was missing the coriander. So that's my one advice on adjusting the recipe. And you can adjust it however you want. The spices don't make a difference in the fermentation. It's pure taste. So if you want nothing but garlic and dill in your pickles, just put garlic and dill. If you like more spice in your pickles, put some of those other spices. It's totally up to you. But you've got a dill pickle recipe in there, and that's what this is so that you guys can taste it. It just doesn't have this one doesn't have the fennel or the coriander.
Where do you get the grape leaves?
You go outside and you pick them somewhere.
I mean, you find some of the grapes. Okay.
The reason for the grape leaves is the tannins in the grape leaves keep the cucumbers from turning mushy. That's why. There's some other, I've heard oak leaves. There's a few other plants that have those same things in it. It's just grape leaves are the most accessible. Okay, this is the bread and butter pickle recipe, and you get to learn from my mistake on this one too. So I wanted to make some sweet pickles, so I found this recipe, and I've been a person who never loved anything but dill pickles. That's all I've ever eaten, and I love these. Like, I eat these over the dill all the time. I love this recipe. But I wanted to make them kind of sweet, and so I put in some extra honey. Now,
That's not on this recipe.
okay, guess what happens if you put in extra honey and then you leave your pickles to ferment? The bacteria eats it all, and I wasted my raw honey. They're not sweet. They're not sweet at all because the bacteria ate it all. So if you want sweet pickles, go through your first couple stages of fermentation first. And then when you're at the end of the process, go back and maybe add your honey when you're going to move them to the fridge or whatever the case may be, because they just ate all the honey, and you can taste them. These are yummy. They're really good, but they're not sweet because no more honey. Yes, it says add the honey at the end if you want that. So that's pickles. So really with pickles, all you have to do, gently wash your cucumbers. Slice them, spear them, put them in whole, whatever is the case based on the size of the cucumbers you've got. Put in your grape leaves, your spices, whatever you want to add, and then you have to create a salt brine. And we're going to do that in a minute here for the sauerkraut, so you can actually do this live. But you just have to get the percentage of water and salt right. And I have put it in there for you in very simple terms, both in a weight measurement if you want to weigh your stuff, and in a measuring terms if you want to measure your stuff. So it should be really easy to get your salt percentages right.
So I don't see any vinegar in any of this. So
You never put vinegar in a fermented food. Except true vinegar is a fermented food. That's why you buy raw apple cider vinegar with the mother in the bottom. That's your SCOBY. That mother in the bottom is the symbiotic colony of yeast and bacteria that makes vinegar. But vinegar is a separate creature. You're not using vinegar in your fermented vegetables. Yeah, it helps your stomach acid. It's got probiotics in it. Yeah, it's got a lot of beneficial things. All right, let's talk about some of the other simple vegetables, and then we'll make sauerkraut. How are we doing on time? Okay, we're okay. All right, if you're just starting your family into fermented foods, a probiotic foods, you're not going to tell them it's fermented, right? Here's two great places to start. These are carrot sticks and green beans that have just been put in here with garlic and dill. So you've got a dill-flavored carrot, a little bit that's got just a little bit of a dill taste to it. You've got green beans that have got a little bit of a dill. And a lot of kids who would never touch sauerkraut or whatever yet, because they don't have that taste bud developed, will eat these. Super easy, same thing. Put your spices in the bottom of the jar, layer your vegetables, salt brine on top, live in airspace this big, close the lid. Now, there is a time difference. Pickles are going to be a couple week-long fermentation process, and it's all in your instructions before you move these to cold storage. These you're only going to want to do a couple days. So taste them at about a day and a half, and it's okay to, when you're doing these, it's okay to open it to taste. You know, that's okay. Open it at about a day and a half, 2 days, open it and taste. It'll just get stronger in its sour taste the longer you leave it. So it's purely up to you to decide when it's reached the point that you think your family's going to like the taste. How long do you leave yours? Have you done these, Andrea? How long do you leave them?
Usually
2 days. Yeah, 2 days. These are both 2-day ferments that I've got here for you to taste.
When you say 2 days, that's in room temperature?
Room temperature. Then you put it in the fridge. And these this is not something probably that you're going to do in bulk, like you're going to do cabbage and pickles.
Unless you have my kids. My kids love the carrot. Terrible.
Chow them down. So I have not experimented with putting these in kind of a 50-degree temp, because at 50 degrees it is going to still keep fermenting a little bit, so they're going to get stronger in taste. Whereas when you put them in the fridge, a normal fridge at 40 degrees or wherever you are, that's going to pretty much stop fermentation. So your taste is going to stay more consistent. Is the only issue.
With all the spices at the bottom, do you ever need to kind of shake it?
I do. I just kind of would do that once in a while and kind of just see it's alive. Kind of distribute things. I did do that gently as they were going.
Once you've got it to the taste you like, can you take it out of the water so it'll stop fermenting and store it in the fridge without?
Well, you want to still keep the environment where that bacteria stays alive. Do you know what I mean? You want to get to the point that that bacteria is no longer growing, but you want it to stay alive. If you pull them totally out, it's going to die. If they didn't have that brine anymore, your probiotics aren't going to live. So you just want to get it cold enough that it's stopping.
And how do you serve it to the kids? Is it carrot sticks? Is it
Yeah, just as carrot sticks. Now, if you cook them, you're going to lose your probiotics. So yeah, this is all raw food. It's all meant to be eaten raw. So yeah, you're just going to take with a fork there again, because you don't want to be introducing bacteria in. Just take out the amount you want to eat. Feed it to your kids. Leave all the brine. Now, when you take all of this out, what do you have left? Probiotic brine for your salad dressings. So don't throw that water away. All right, so that's pickles. There's beans. Those are both really easy. Here's the cauliflower. This is a curry cauliflower that I've just put the curry powder in, and that's it.
Did you do that with broccoli?
Yeah. You guys, if you want to get really into this, there's a Facebook group called Wild Fermentation. And you guys, they ferment it'll blow your mind what they ferment. You can ferment anything. But these are just some basics to get you started. So same thing, spices in, vegetables in, salt brine in, close, 2 days, and then it was moved to the fridge. Actually, I think the cauliflower I stopped at about a day and a half because I wanted it to stay a little more crunchy. But it doesn't matter. It's not going to be bad for you if you leave it longer. It's just a change in taste. So it's just stopping it where you want.
And then how long before whatever is left over you just dump out? You probably would never get that far, but if it sits in my fridge for a week or two, I mean, how long would it?
Oh, months.
Really?
In your fridge, months and months. You leave it a year in your fridge, it might not be very probiotic anymore. But no, these bacteria preserve. This is nature's preservation system. So you can leave this in your fridge for a long time. It's not going to go bad.
After a year,
It probably isn't going to have the same because they're going to run out of a food source. So you're probably, it's not going to stay as probiotic forever. Okay, so you guys had the fermented salsa on Thursday for your lunch. There again, is your family going to know? Not unless you tell them. This is bruschetta topping. Is your family going to know?
maybe some
Not unless you... Now, here's the other advantage. This is my tomatoes from last fall. And they've just been kept in a fridge all winter. You cannot keep fruit at room temperature fermenting, or you have alcohol. Tomatoes are a fruit. So this had to be stored all winter in a fridge. But I did, to do this retreat, I had to buy a second fridge. and so I now have a fermenting fridge. That's where all the fermenting stuff goes. Bruschetta, you know, where you go to Olive Garden and you've got the olive oil bread, and then it's the topping that's tomatoes, basil, and garlic. You ever had that? And they just spread it on the bread as a topping on the bread.
So you still do the 3 days in room temperature before?
Yes, before you put this in the fridge. And you'll know it's alive. It'll get all bubbly and blah, 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 and you just let that go for a couple of days and then move it to a fridge. And that for both salsa and bruschetta. Now, the thing you have to do differently with tomatoes is you have to do it by weight. So I don't have a precise recipe for you of salsa. Everyone likes their salsa differently. So take whatever salsa recipe you already love, make it up, chop all your vegetables, and then weigh it. This is my favorite scale. This is an OXO scale, and the reason I love it is this. So when you are doing fermented food and you put your bowl on and you can't see the numbers anymore, it's really, really handy. So you can weigh all your fermented food in a really big bowl, and with this scale you can still see your weight. So what I would do for salsa is I would chop up all my stuff, my peppers, my onions, my tomatoes, whatever I want to have, and then I put it in here and I weigh it. And then you get to do some math. What percentage of salt does it tell you need in your recipe for salsa? 2.5, which is the average for most vegetables. There's only a few exceptions. So then you have to get your calculator and take how many grams or ounces or pounds, however you're weighing it, and times it by 0.025. Then you take this off, you put another bowl on here, and we're gonna do this a little bit with sauerkraut. Put another bowl on here and weigh your salt that's that amount that you calculated, right? Does that make sense? Do you understand how to calculate it? Measure that amount of salt and then mix that amount of salt into your salsa or your bruschetta topping and then put it in the jar. And that way, because there's so much water in tomatoes, you don't want to add any water solution. You want the only water to be what's naturally in the tomatoes. So by just weighing your total weight of the food and adding the salt to that, you don't end up with a watery substance in the end. You're using the tomatoes as your water.
You weigh your bowl.
So weigh your bowl first, zero it out, put all your salsa in, multiply it by 0.025, add that amount of salt to this, mix it up, and then put it in your jar. And then same thing, you just leave this for about 2 to 3 days, watch it get all bubbly and active, and then move it to your fridge. Okay?
Did you say to keep not to room temperature? It's already in the fridge. You don't ferment it.
2 to 3 days at room temperature, then fridge.
For your tomatoes.
For your tomatoes.
Or if I said not to do that.
But you can't, I wanted to try to find a way to can my tomatoes this way, ferment my tomatoes this way and put them in my root cellar, and you can't do it. If you just put it at a root cellar temperature, you'll end up with alcohol. So it's got to be colder than that. It's got to be at a fridge. This is fun. This is cranberry chutney. You want fermented cranberry sauce at Thanksgiving? Here you go. The recipe is in your book. It's another one of those. You're just chopping it all up, mixing it and sticking it in the jar, leaving it for a couple of days at room temperature till it gets all nice and bubbly, moving it to the fridge. Same process. Now this one is not very sweet because I kind of like, wow, it's still bubbling already. I kind of like the tart cranberry thing. But if you were making this for your family and they were used to a sweet cranberry sauce, Same thing. Don't add a ton of honey at the beginning or it's just going to get eaten. Get to the point that you're ready to put it in the fridge and then add more honey to it to make it the sweetness that you want and then put it away in the fridge. But this one's really yummy. That one will be a fun one for you to taste. Okay, so let's do sauerkraut. Let's actually make it because this one takes a little bit of elbow grease. So I need some volunteers. Evelyn, you're strong. No, I won't pick on you. I'm just kidding. You don't have to. Anyone who wants to. Now, for this, I use a giant metal bowl, and I love my rolling pin with a blunt end because we are going to pound this sauerkraut to death. Okay? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put the cabbage in the bowl, and we're going to sprinkle it with the right amount of salt, and then we are just going to pound, 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 and it's going to cause the juices of the cabbage to release from the salt, and it's going to create its own brine. We're going to add no liquid. By pounding, you actually extract the liquid from the cabbage, and it becomes its own brine. Okay?
Cabbage is 95% water.
Right. So we're just going to be in the process of extracting it. So here we go. So we're going to put our bowl on, turn this on, let it zero out, and then let's weigh our cabbage. So do you guys have the sauerkraut recipe in front of you? Because I don't. Now, I just put this through my food processor. Purists, use a hand mandolin, do whatever you want. Now, when you do your cabbage, you're going to get pieces that come through like this. If you want a really uniform sauerkraut, go through and pick these out. We're not going to take the time to do that at the moment, but you get a much more uniform sauerkraut if you only have this kind of shred and you don't put in this kind of shred. So when I do it at home and I'm doing a whole bunch, I go through and I pick these out and then I cook with these. You know, I just throw these in my stir fry or whatever the case may be. We're not going to take the time to do that today, but that will give you a nice uniform sauerkraut. Okay, we have 3 pounds, 6 ounces. Okay, what are we supposed to calculate for salt?
1 teaspoon per pound.
1 teaspoon per pound. So we have just a teeny bit under 3.5 pounds, right?
Okay, so that is scant 3.
Okay. So we're just going to take our salt. 1, 2, and it works even better if you do this in layers, like if I didn't have all of it in here yet. And I put a little bit of sauerkraut in and sprinkled it with salt just so it all gets kind of evenly distributed. So that's 3 and not quite a half. Okay, now you can make this a little bit easier for yourself if we just let this sit for a little bit and the salt's going to start to pull out the water. So let's let this sit for just a few minutes. Let the salt start working its job. And now is your chance, while we're waiting, to ask me any other questions about fermenting, because by the time we finish the sauerkraut, Isaac's going to need to go. So, any other questions?
If you can ferment most everything from your garden that's extra, then why would you need to can?
So that was a revelation to me. I came from a family that gardened and canned. You know, we didn't grow everything, of course, but we grew food and we canned it. And I grew up in the kitchen with my mom, turning the handle of the Victorio strainer to make our tomato juice and to do our applesauce and stuff. And so the really good thing about that was when I got married, I wasn't scared of canning. I didn't know how to do it all, but I had enough confidence that I could figure it out. It was familiar to me. And so I've always canned food since I was married. And then 2 or 3 years ago, I had a moment where I was canning stuff in the fall, and I went, canning's new. Like, I mean, that sounds dumb, but I had never thought that through. Somehow, when you talk about your ancestors and somehow I pictured them with their jars of peaches. And there was a moment where I realized no, heat canning is really new. Like my grandmother's generation is when we invented heat canning. You know, all these people that we think about in the past that were so good with food and preserving, there was no canning. And that really was kind of a shocking moment to me where I realized, wait a minute. If canning is so new, how has this always been done, and why did we switch to canning? So why did we? Why did we switch to canning? It's just easier, and just like the switch from natural yeast to conventional yeast, it's more predictable. It's more controllable. And so we switched to heat canning. But for all of history, the only methods of preserving food are what? We talk about this in my food storage class. But what are the only moods? Fermenting, drying. That's it. That is how nature preserves food. And here's what is so powerful about fermenting and drying. What happens to your nutritional value when you can food? It goes down. What happens to your nutritional value when you ferment or you sun-dry food? It goes up. Think about the power of that. The way that nature preserves food increases the power of the food. It doesn't decrease the power of the food. And so, do I still have a few things I can? Yes, I do. But I am working and moving more and more and more towards this fermenting because I realized it's not necessary. Humankind has lived without canning forever.
What's the name of your dryer, your food dryer?
I have a Sedona. The two best food dryers are a Sedona and an Excalibur. And either one of them will work just fine. The key points of them are they're big and square, and so you've got more options of what you can do than like the ones that are in rings, you know. And the other thing is they have precision temperature control. When you cross 118 degrees, all the enzymes in your food die. And your body needs those enzymes to survive, and we talk about that a lot in my food storage class. We don't have time to go into that today. So when you dry food, it needs to stay below 118 degrees, and the only way you can guarantee that is if you've got a temperature-controlled dehydrator. Okay, who's going to come pound? Where did Evelyn go? Okay, so you just start pounding because it's going to release the water. We're going to break down the cellular structure of the cabbage, and it is going to start to release its water. And we are going to pound this until it's literally half the volume that we started with. Half the size. And I'm not going to do it by myself. You guys are going to take turns. Because this will take 10 minutes or so to just pound this. So if you looked at it now, there's starting to be just moisture that's kind of showing up. The cabbage is getting a little bit shiny as there's starting to be some moisture, but it's not wet yet. And so we just have to pound it, and we will literally get so much juice out of this that it will cover the cabbage in the jar with no other liquid added. Sauerkraut is nothing but salt and cabbage. There's literally no. You can add caraway seeds. You know, some people really like it with that. You can add spices if you want. But at heart, sauerkraut is nothing but cabbage and salt. Okay, who's up next? Okay. You can pound for 2 minutes and then we'll rotate.
Is this what you use it on the stick?
Yep.
What's that called?
It's just a rolling pin. That's my rolling pin. It just is blunt on the edge, and so it works great for this. I don't even remember where I got my rolling pin. It's been a long time. Anything you can pound with and just punch it. I do use it. There's some people who are purists with this that say it should never go in a metal bowl. There again, you know. But that makes me nervous when I'm pounding like this. So I do the metal bowl.
So all of these would last like a year-ish, or like how long they'll last if they're...
This has been in my fridge 6 months. This has been been in my fridge 6 months. These are brand new. I just made these this week. These have sat in my root cellar since last fall's harvest.
Once you take your pickles out of the cold storage and open them,
Yes. Once I open and start eating out of these, they just go in my main fridge, and I keep them in the fridge for the rest of the time. If you've got a really big bottle like this, when you get halfway down, it's good to move it to a smaller container because then you've created a really big air pocket, which can inhibit your bacteria. So if you've got a big bottle and you get down and you're not going to eat it pretty fast, if it's going to be in your fridge for a while, move it to a smaller bottle so you don't have a big air pocket in it.
My mother-in-law used to make quite less pickles, and we would use vinegar, and mustard, and it was a big pot. And then we put a lid on top of it, and we just kept bringing in cucumbers, and it would last all summer to the fall. Is that
Peas
similar?
porridge in the pot, 9 days old.
So that
Fermented food,
so it's
right?
still healthy, though. That's still.
It's just going to be different. It's just going to be different. That's an oxygen-based fermentation, so you're going to have the development of different bacteria than you would in an anaerobic environment.
So it's still okay.
Yeah.
Really are good.
Yeah.
Can you reuse the brine after you do all of the stuff?
Yeah, so that's what you, no, don't reuse it to make a new ferment because you have no idea of how much salt you've got.
Oh, okay.
You can't get your salt percentage exact. And so that's why the salad dressing thing is so awesome, because otherwise you've got all of this leftover brine and it feels, most people don't want to swig it. You can, it's awesome. You know, if Diana, you asked me about the class I taught about babies. If you've got a baby with colic and reflux, give them a half a teaspoon of sauerkraut juice. Start getting that probiotics. Just give them a squirt of the juice and start getting those probiotics in their system. Okay, let's start stuffing this. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. So we're just gonna start stuffing this in the jar. Can you see how watery it is now? It's about half the volume it was when we started. And we're just gonna start stuffing it in here. And then you can pound it even more. Then you can start doing this, and you see how that water line starts coming up above the cabbage? Go ahead, you can stuff, I'll pound.
Is there any other thing that you can use to pound it if you don't have one of those sticks?
Anything that's the right shape and clean will work.
I'm sure you could get one of those at Ace Hardware.
Yeah.
Can I make a suggestion? If
Yeah.
you go to the lumberyard and get one of those, get a hardwood, you get a softwood like pine or fir, there's a lot of little pores in there that you're pounding your things that will work up and take on, but a hardwood would.
Yeah, this is a hardwood. You wouldn't want a softwood.
Oak or maple or poplar or any of the hardwoods would work.
And is it sealed?
No, this one is not.
Or a plastic mallet would work.
Okay, so I mean there is, you guys can't really, can you see when I push? Look how much liquid. And that's just all from the cabbage. We haven't supplemented any liquid at all. Okay, so that's all we do. And that's turned out perfect. That was 3.5 pounds. And it's in your recipe there. You know,
Do you know how many heads of cabbage that was?
that was 1.5 large heads that I shredded. Okay, and then all you do is close that and leave it at room temperature. Now, the fermentation of sauerkraut is actually pretty interesting. So it is recommended with sauerkraut to ferment for at least 8 to 12 weeks. So you can move it. You can move it to cooler after the first 2 weeks,
Did you add
but not fridge cold.
Is there salt in that yet?
Yes, we sprinkled the salt over the cabbage and then we pounded it. So
2 weeks room temperature?
at least 2 weeks room temperature. You can leave it at room temperature for up to 8 to 12 weeks. You can move it to a slightly colder, 50 to 60 degrees after 2 weeks, but you're not going to want to stick it in your fridge until at least 8 to 12 weeks. Because they've just found that, you're just going to cut it short. So if you stick it in your fridge after 2 weeks, the only bacteria you'll have bacteria. Would it be good to eat? Yes. But you're only going to have the strains that develop in those first 2 weeks. And there's others that kick in later that you want to give it long enough to get for your own benefit. Does someone else have a question?
Just, we have a crock that we use.
Melanie has a fermenting crock because her husband made her a ceramic crock. The crocks are very expensive if you have to buy them. Melanie, do you want to tell them about your crock?
I have 3 of the German fermenting crocks, and they have a water canal around the top that the lid fits into that acts like the water seal on the top of the jar. So I just have to keep that full, and the gases bubble out and the air can't get in. You can buy them. Smith & Edwards sells fermenting crocks. They're not inexpensive.
It's just more expensive than this, but it works. That's a very traditional way to ferment.
Then what would you do? Put it in sack? Put it in jars?
As soon as it's finished, I move it to jars and put it in so that I can use something else in the crock. Angie's used the crocks before. Andrea has.
So to know if it's a fermenting crock, you need to look for a water, what did you call it?
It's got a water canal seal. It has a double lip on the top, so the top's going to be double lipped and the lid fits in between those.
The harder thing for me was remembering to fill the water reservoir versus these. Just let it speak.
Yes.
This is the simplest
But
method.
you can
it's
do
not
bigger
the
batches.
only. It's not the only method. It's just
So there's You that never benefit. have to burp them. You never have to open once you seal
no,
and put
because when it gets enough pressure that it needs to release, it'll just bubble right out of that seal. So I don't burp mine. I mean, often they get a little bit of burping when I check on something or whatever, but I don't deliberately burp mine on a regular basis because I know it can handle it. If it couldn't, I wouldn't have piles of water on my, that fact that you get the overflow and that shows it can handle it. It's fine. And this is really strong glass. It's not going to explode on you. So it is going to come out of the seal first before it blows up your glass.
So if I wanted to purchase some before you guys figure out the very best price, am I looking for a particular brand to know it's
Fido.
quality? Oh, that's the brand.
No, that's not. That's the name of the jar, but there's only one. The company is Italian, Bermoli. But there's only one company that makes Fido jars. If you find something labeled, it says Fido across the top, and they're Italian. They're really good glass. So that's it. Okay, so is that less scary?
Yeah.
Now?
I feel confident doing it.
So, start wherever you want. You can start with milk kefir that's just dump your greens in, walk away for 24 hours and eat. You can start getting into some of these vegetables where the only thing you have to worry about is getting your salt percentage right and giving it a seal, an anaerobic seal. That's really the only 2 things. Just keep it sealed and give it the right percentage of salt, and nature does everything else for you. There's not that much to worry about.
So the advantage or the nutritional advantage of doing the vegetables or are the yogurt, the kefir, is that better probiotics or is it just different?
It's just different, and the more variety you can give your body, the more strains you can develop for your gut health. So start where you want to start and then expand, because there is not one that's best. But there again, trust your body a little bit. If you have one that you try and pretty soon you're like, oh, I gotta have, do you know what I mean? If you start to crave that, there's a reason. Pay attention to that. There may be times that your body needs more of one than another, so also pay attention. Now here again, we're not talking about taste, because the taste may take you a while to get rid of, but pay attention to how your body feels. If you eat one of these and you feel your energy level rise, if you feel your body do that internal happy dance, have you guys felt that? Do you know what I'm talking about? You know, most of us, that takes us a while to recognize that. But when you eat something and your body, it's just happy on the inside. It's just, you know, I don't know. It's hard to describe. But once you've felt that, it takes a little practice to identify that. But once you learn to identify that, let it guide you. Even in your fermented foods, for which ones maybe you need and how much you need of it. You may have times where you are craving it every single day, and that just sounds, and then you may have other times where it's like, I don't need as much right now. You know, once you start giving your body the right things, it recognizes them and it knows when it needs them. And it'll tell you. So. Last question. Go ahead, you're fine.
You just make up a relish plate or something like to introduce this at dinner with the family? Or?
The ideal is actually to have at least, that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked that. The ideal is to have at least a few bites of fermented food with every meal, because then you're going to digest everything. So I do have times when there's a bite of sauerkraut on my kid's plate and they don't get any more of anything else, so that goes in, you know, because you need a little bit all the time. And so if you put even one carrot stick on your child's or your husband's or your plate at every meal, everything's going to get better, you know. And you can start small, but a little bit at every meal will start to change your digestive system.
You're supposed to eat it first before the meal?
Any time is good, but yeah, if you get it in a little bit before, it's going to help stimulate that digestive process in your gut.